Hi, I wanted to walk through some of the same commands and actions you would take in SQL and Python. As a data analyst, a data scientist, Python and SQL are going to be two of the most fundamental coding languages that you're going to use. And they're going to be the main drivers that you use or tools for data manipulation. So I wanted to walk through selecting columns, filtering data, grouping, adding a column, creating conditional columns, unpivoting the top results, joining tables, and sorting data in both of these tools. So let's get started. So I'm going to pop over to Microsoft SQL Server Studios, and I'm going to create a database and load in some data. You might have a database you already can work with, but just for kind of teaching purposes, I'll show you how to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to databases. I'm going to right click on any of the icons here, go to new database. I'm going to call this, let's just call this test 2 for me. I'm going to hit OK. And then you see I have this test 2 database. Now what you can do is load in your data using task. And I'm going to go over to task and I'm going to import a flat file. And I'm going to go over and find the flat file that I want. So from here, I'm going to hit next. I have that file loaded. I can hit next. And now you can see a preview of the data here. I'm going to hit next again. And this is just asking you what the primary key is and whether you want to allow nulls for this particular file. We're not going to worry about that. I'm going to hit next and then finished. Close. Now you have access to this database. So once you have access there, you can go to new and you can have your SQL query there. Now the first thing I want you to notice is, look, you are selected on this particular database. So that means you don't have to add the schema to each one of your queries. So you're selected on the test database, so you can actually access the tables within that database. So we want to be able to select our columns. I'm making a document string with the dashes. So, and the text is a little bit small, so let's go over to tools, options, and then we can change the text, and I'm going to create a little bit bigger. Let's go with, so we want to select columns, but first, to select everything, you just use a star after select. So select is the command that is going to allow you to select columns or any information outside of your table. So if we put a star, this is a wildcard, and then from, and then if we look at the table name by clicking our test 2 database on the right side, going over the table, you can see that you have this dbo.avocado. So you can see if I start writing avocado, you can see that pop up. So if I run this, now you can see all that information pop up. However, we want to select a column, so I can choose one of these columns that I want. And let's choose region. And you can see that pop up, and you can see this column symbol. Now, you won't have this in all your databases, and depending on what kind of, your database access tool, whatever you are using. But you can see I have region there selected. So now we want to, I think I'll do all of this in SQL and then pop over to Python. So let's go over and create another document string. We want to filter data, right? So we have our query, select, and I can just copy this. And then now we have select region from avocado. So we can add a where statement for filtering. So let's copy that and then add our where statement, and I'm going to choose where region equals Orlando. And I'm going to pass in those single quotes. I'm going to just select this by highlighting it. You can right click or you can press F5 to execute. Now we're selecting a single column, but what if we wanted everything, limiting all the rows to just Orlando? Then we can just replace this with our star, which gives us everything. I'm going to right click that again, and now you see Orlando is all the data that we selected. Let's create another string and let's go over to grouping data. Group data. We can either copy this query and say, okay, let's take all our Orlando data and we can group our data. Now, grouping data is a little bit different because remember that you are going to be essentially smashing the data down. So let's take average price. And we have average price. And then we're going to be grouping by a categorical or string. So if we look at our data here, and we can say, okay, give me all of average price. And let's get rid of this by region. Now, average price is an average, right? And then we have all of these particular days. So we have a lot of data there. Now, to group, you need to pass in an aggregation function. So an aggregation function can be a sum. So it doesn't make too much sense to look at a sum of the average price. And then what we want to do is group, but I'll show you for purposes. Group by, and then maybe we can group by region. And then if we run this, now you can see the group by region. But as you see, we haven't selected that column. We can't see the region. So we can go back up and we can add the region as one of the columns that we want to select. So now you have two columns that you're selecting. We can highlight this again, run that, and now you can see you have the sum of that region. As you see, this column has no name also. But this is the sum of the average price. But we can also use another aggregator. We can use average, so AVG. And now you can see the average price per region. But now we want to give this a column name. So we can go behind the two columns that we've selected and use as. So as what? As price. Now we probably want to start formatting this because you can start to see that it's just getting long. So I'm going to take this comma that we have that separates the two columns, and then I am going to isolate the next column that's selected, which we're calling price, and then using a from statement. And now you can see it's a little bit easier to read. So if I highlight that, now you can see that we have that price column. Next, let's create another query where we're going to create a conditional column. So now that we have this region by average cost, I kind of like this. So I want to find out first, before I make a conditional column, is what's the average price of all our prices. So I'm just going to quickly select average price. So select average with our aggregator, and then I'm going to pass in average price from avocado. So just a very simple query. Then I'm going to highlight that, F5 it, highlight that and execute it. So this is about 1.4 is the average. So I want to create a conditional column. So let me just get rid of this by just commenting out. I want to know for our regions, anything over the average of 1.4, I want to be able to say that's an expensive region and inexpensive region. So, however, I need this table that I have here to select from. Now, we know we can select from the tables that exist in our database, but we can also create a common table expression. So, I have this table. I'm going to copy it. And that gives us what we see in the area below. But now I'm going to be able to access this table by kind of with. And then what I need to do is add a name for this table. So I'm going to call it region group, I guess. As. So now we've isolated that, and I need to close the commas. And let me make some space here. So now that we have this table, I can select from it. Looks like, see, when you have this syntax here, that means there's an issue. And the issue is probably that there's no select statement. So I'm going to select everything from this region group table. So region group. So when I run that, you can see I get everything from the region group there. And we have, it's showing us an error, but you can see if we highlight all that, we can run it. Now, I want to be able to create another column. So what we can do is we're selecting everything from that. So from region group, what I actually just want is the region. So I'm just going to isolate region there. And then I'm going to create another column using a case. So this is going to allow me to make a conditional column. So case when price is greater than 1.40, then call this expensive. And we'll format this in a second. Else, give me inexpensive. And then also now we need to end this. Now you can see that it's gotten very long. So I'm going to start formatting that. I'm going to separate the columns. So then we have this. Now we actually didn't name this column. So let's name it. Let's add as to name our column. And we'll call this price category. So now if I run this total query that we have here, you can see we have which which regions are inexpensive and expensive as our new column. Let's unpivot some data. So first, let's take a look at our column, and we can go back up to our original. We can take a look at our data by just creating a new string, unpivot data. And then I'm going to select everything from avocado. And while we're here, because I don't want to see all the data, because it might actually take a long time to select all your data. So depending on which technology you're using, you might have to use a limit statement, but we want to see the top results, maybe the top 10 rows. So I'm going to use top 10. So we actually, let's say, top results. So we can see this. Now we have this, and we can actually have to move this. We don't want to select everything and get the top 10. We want to select top 10 and top 10 what? We want top 10 everything. So if we run this, we can get the top 10 rows. And you can see it goes from the index 0 to 1. And this is the index here. It looks like an additional column. But you can see here, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the first 10 rows. As you can see, we got the top 10 results. But we have small bags and large bags. And I would love to see this unpivoted. So taken from a column to a row. So we're unpivoting. Columns to rows. So let's just select those two. And we can use the same results here. So instead of the top 10 here, maybe we want to choose that we want. So small bags, you can see that column there, and then large bags. And then if I run this, select that and execute, you can see we have small and large bags. Now if I unpivot that, what am I want to see? Maybe I want to see the small and large bags by type. So we can add another column in front of that called type. Just to take a look at our data. Yeah, so we have type there. So maybe I want to unpivot this. Now unpivoting is, when we unpivot, you usually get a variable and a value. So we need to tell the query what is that variable and value. So this is going to look a little different from what you've seen before. So now we know what this is. So I'm just going to comment this out. And now I'm going to select the type, because we know that's what we want. And then I'm unpivoting those two, so I'm getting a variable, which is a category name. So I need to call it something, so I'm going to call it category. And then I give it a value, I'm going to give it amount. I know this looks a little strange because these columns don't exist until we get a from statement. From, and then I'm going to go to from avocado, and then we're going to use the unpivot function. And you can see that light up to gray. And then I'm going to say amount for category. So the amount for category in, so just remember this syntax. I'm getting unpivoting. I'm getting the amount for category. And where is that data? It's in the small bags and the large bag. And then I'm going to close that off. All right. And I'm going to call this as, I don't know, unpivot example. Oh, I got a misspelling small. So small bags. Let's highlight this and run it. And now you can see that we have small bags and large bags as a unpivoted table. So the last thing we're going to do is merge some tables. So we only have one table in our database, so we need to add another one. How can we do that? And then we're going to go to task. We're going to go to import flat file. We're going to go to next. We're going to find the file. So I'm going to add holidays to the table schema we have there. It's not going to change. And let's change the name of this table to make it easier to query from. So I'm going to change it to holiday and hit next. And you can see that data is previewed there, and finish and close. So you hit the refresh button here, open this up, go to tables, And now you can see your two tables there. So let's take a look at the holiday table. We know we can do that, so let's select top results. So I'm going to do top 10 from holiday, and I'm going to choose everything. Now you can definitely add the schema in front of that. You're going to get the same thing. It's the DVO. And you may need to do this just in case. So we want to be able to, I'm going to just comment that out. We want to be able to add this to our table. So we're going to add this to our avocado table. So let's select everything from avocado. And then what we're going to do is join our holiday table. Now we need to join it on something. And we both have a date, but I don't want to write avocado and date over again to specify which table to get this. So I'm going to call this A by putting an A behind it and a B behind this. So I'm going to say A.date equals B.date. And I'm going to run this and show you what we get. So you can see if I go all the way over there, we have two dates now. Two date columns, and we have the holiday column. And this, by default, is going to be a inner join. So if I go down to the bottom here, you can see I have 1,620 rows. But if I just comment this join out, let's see if it works with the A there. You can see I have 18,000 rows. So I want to be able to keep all my rows. So instead of using this default, what we call an inner join, where we're just keeping the tables that match. And let me run that for you and show you the count. So you can see that's when we only get those 16,000 rows. Now if I want a left join, that means I make sure I preserve all the things in the first column, which is the avocado. That means if it's not matching, it doesn't matter. I'll still get a null. So if I left join and run this, you can see now we have a bunch of nulls, but we have the same count here. We have our left join with all our rows. So we know we have these null values and we have this extra date column. So why don't we modify our query to say give me the A date, because that's the only one I'm worried about. And A would be our first table, the avocado table, so this table. I want the holiday, which is the B holiday. And then I want A average price, because that's in our A table. And then if I run this query, now we should be fine. Run this. And now we have that holiday table with our nulls. So I want to replace that null. And you know we can do that very easily. So we can create a subquery by selecting. We can select everything from, and we can call this table 1. Now we can see we selected from that. So I'm going to select, well, let's select the date first. Date, and then case when holiday is null, then give me normal day, else give me holiday. So I'm going to get the holiday from that, and let's end that. And let's format this so we can see this a bit better. So I'm going to isolate the columns on each row and then I'm going to call this category. So I'm going to highlight that and execute. So now you see we have a normal day, and then we have the holiday. Now I also want to be able to pull one more column from this, which is average price. To add average price, and comma, and then highlight this. Now we have the average price there for each one of these days. But now, why don't we take it to the next level and we eliminate the date. So let's create, I want to know the average price on normal and holidays. So now we can get we can just copy and paste our query, and then I'm going to wrap this select statement in another statement, and then I'm going to call this table tab 2. And what I want, let's test it by just selecting the category out. So select category, I'm going to highlight that and run that. So we need to make sure we have a from, select category from, and then we run that. And now we have the category. So now what I need is the average price, the average of the average price, right? Because we want the average. And then we want to group by category. All right, so then we can highlight this and we can run it. And now we have the average price of each holiday in the normal days. So the last thing we want to do is, of course, we want to put our as price. So we want to take the average of the average price, and then we want to order by the price column. So I'm just going to say order by 2, since it's our second column, to sort everything. So let's run that. And now we can see we have the lowest price and the highest price, and you can add another command there to change whether that's ascending or descending. So we can see Labor Day weekend, we get the highest price for avocados, and then a normal day we're at 1.4 also. So let's pop over to our Python and do the same thing. Hi, so we're going to do many of the steps and functions that we use in SQL and perform those in Python. So the first thing we need to do is bring in our data, load it in, and we're going to do that with our pandas function. So we need to import pandas, and then we want to not continually write pandas over and over again to access those functions. So we're going to save it as a smaller variable, and you can pick any variable you want. I just picked PD for pandas. You can see that in a lot of people's code. Now that I have that, I can read in the CSV using a read _ CSV function. And then what you're going to do is go over and find out where that is, shift, and copy as path. Once you have that, your avocado data set, we're going to control and paste that in. We're going to change the direction of the slashes because these slashes in that direction are escape slashes. And then we can read in that data. So now I can just press Shift Enter or F5 in order to read in that data. And you can see there is our table of data. So I'm going to go a little bit differently and cover some of the things. So when we want to see the top part of our data, we want to look at the head of our data. But before that, I don't want just have this reading the file and printing here. I want to save that as a table name, similar to what we did with a CTE. And you can see that I can save it as DF, which is a data frame. Now that I have that data frame, I'm just going to press head. And I'm going to type head. And that's going to give us the top rows of our data. So by default, you're going to see 5 there. You can add another number in, like 2, and then you'll get the top 2 rows. You can add any number you want, 20, 30, 40, but it's just going to give you the top part of the data frame. Next, you want to be able to select a column. So let's document our code. So I'm going to use the # and then load in data as what we're doing here. And I'm also going to use the # here and say select column. So what I want to do is create some more cells for us. So I can hit escape and B to get some cells, go back into that cell. Now I have my variable DF and I want to select the column. We can do that in 2 ways. We can use bracket notation and pass in the column name. So you can see the region here. So I'm just going to pass in the region. And now that I have that isolated, now you can see the region here. And this ellipsis is just showing that it's being truncated. And these numbers here are the index, like a count. And we can also see the number of entries or rows within that selected column or series. Now that we have that, we can select things in a couple ways in Python. You can also, so I'm going to use the # to code that out and use dot region as a dot notation and run that again and we get the same answer. So those are 2 ways to select columns. Now we want to filter data, and there's a couple ways to filter data. So let's just call what we're doing by using this and say filter data. We're going to filter our data in a couple ways. So first I'm going to isolate a column. Let's say region, and I'm going to say region equals. Now in this regards, if we put 1 equal sign, this is not equals, this is assigning something. So I'm going to use 2 equal signs, and then I'm going to pass in Orlando. So if I run this by either hitting the run side or hitting shift and enter, you can see that it's false. So what it's going and looking through each one of those columns and seeing what's false. So this is a condition. So we can pass that condition and apply it to our data frame or table by wrapping it in brackets and applying it to this data frame, which we saved as DF. And now if I go over and look at the data here, we have Orlando as the region. We can also filter in a different way. So I'm just going to copy my condition here. And I'm going to comment that out and place that here. And now I'm going to assign a name to this. So I'm going to call it condition equals Orlando. And this I can pass into our data frame as a condition. And then if I run that, you can see we get the same answers. And now that table, we can use the head function. And I'm just going to look at the top, let's say. So I'm going to pass that in. And now the next thing I want to do, so I'm going to escape and BBB, group our data, grouping data. So now we have our data frame. called df. We can use the function group by. We can tell it what do we want to group by. We want to group by region. What do we want? We want to see the average price. And then we need to pass it an aggregation. So when we're smashing data like this, how do we want it to be aggregated? Do we want it to be summed? Do we want it to be averaged? So if I hit sum, you can see that number is summed across all of our regions. However, that's not so effective, so we can see the average, which we use as mean. And you can use median or standard deviation as. Next, we want to start working on a conditional column. So I'm going to hit escape in BBB. So let's say conditional. We're going to import NumPy as NP. So I'm importing a NumPy package and saving as NP. For this is usually the easiest way to get a condition in. There are a couple different ways, but I'm just going to show you this way because I think it's, simple. So maybe we want to find out which category was expensive and not. So when on each one of these, let's go up to the data frame, when was the average price expensive? And from our previous example, we saw the mean of all of our prices was 1.4. And I'll just show you how to do that with escape at A. And I'm going to isolate that column, which is average price. And then I'm going to take the average of that. You can see it's 1.44. So I want to create a new column. So the way we create a new column is just pass in the name of a column that we want to create. And so I'm going to put price category. And let's just do this for an example. I can pass anything into that column. So you can see I'm assigning with the one equal sign a 1. And then I'm going to, after I run that, because we know this code is sequential, I'm going to look at the top, let's look at the top 10 rows. So now once I have that, if I go over, you can see there's nothing but 1 in price category. So instead of a 1, now we can tell it to evaluate what we want to see. So we want to say NP where, and I'm going to close that off. And then what I'm going to do is that's a function using the NumPy library. So it says it returns X or Y for depending on the condition. So first we pass it the condition, right? So what we can do is we can create the condition by saying the average price by isolating that column. And then what I'm going to do is put that in quotations, is greater than 1.405. So when that condition is met, what do I want? So Shift Tab is going to give you your answer, X or Y. So if that condition is true, I'm going to say expensive. If that condition is false, I'm going to use inexpensive. And then we're going to run that and we should see this category being changed. So now I'm going to go back over and you can see we have inexpensive for that, but let's go down so we can see a little bit more. So I'm going to change this to inexpensive. So what I'm going to do so we can see this is say, okay, I want to filter this data frame that we're looking at, and we know how to do that. We can filter the data frame using a condition. So, in a condition, df price category. And then I'm just going to highlight that and put it in quotations. And I'm going to say equals. So double equals, pass that in. So now we have a condition, and of course we can just apply that condition to our data frame, and then condition, and then run that. And how about we just look at the top 5 rows, which is there by default. And you can see that there must be a misspelling here, because I want you to take a look here. So you can see that I've misspelled the word here, so it didn't bring back any rows. But if I fix that, now it brings back the rows that are expensive. Now, one thing we can do is, you remember we were selecting columns, so I just want to show you how to select multiple columns. So select multiple columns, because I don't remember multiple columns. So we have a list. So a list is notated by brackets. And what I can say is just give me the total volume and give me the price cap. So now we have what is called a list indicated by these brackets. So I can call it whatever I want. Maybe I call it a column list and equal. So I have this column list, and I can pass that column list into a data frame now by using the brackets and just passing in the variable column list. And let's see what we get back. So price category, there is a spelling mistake. So you can see it's very sensitive. So now I'm going to pass in price category. And now you can see I'm only getting the columns that I've indicated. And of course, we can just apply the top to that with head. Unpivot our data. So in our example, we unpivoted, in our SQL example, we unpivoted our large and small bags. So let's do the same here. So we can select a list and pass it in. So what I did is provide a variable here, but another way to do that. So let's unpivot, and let's call this. All right, this is quite easy. So we want to be able to see the type is one of the columns that we're into. And we want to be able to see the small bags. And so before this, because I don't remember what they were called, I'm going to press Escape and A. I'm going to use that data frame, and I want to see all the columns. So I can use dot columns and run that, and now I can see all of the columns. And I'm just going to docustring that, see all columns. And now it'll be easier for me just to copy this and save some time. And just pass this in. And now, you know, we said a list is indicated by a bracket. So we have to pass that list into our data frame. And the way we do that is, now what we're going to do is we're going to double bracket that because we're passing the list. So we're selecting this list, and this list is indicated by this particular number of columns. So if I run that, now we have a list of large and small bags. And I'm going to call this our Unpivot table. So now that I have that, I can, of course I can run that, and that's saved as a variable. We can look at it, unpivot.head, unpivot table, underscore, and then we can run that, and now we can see our table. So what I'm going to do is unpivot this table. So I'm going to get our table, which is called unpivot table. I'm going to use the variable that we got, which was PD, and I'm going to use something called melt, which is equivalent to unpivot. So for this, we have unpivot is going to naturally, let me open this up. So if you press Shift Tab twice, you can see what arguments or parameters you can pass in. So you can see the first thing that we want to pass in is the data frame, and the data frame is called unpivot. So I'm going to copy and paste that in, and I'm just saving over this so we'll be able to see it. And Shift Tab again. So the ID in the value variable. So we know ID is going to be the category. So I'm going to pass in the ID vars. So I'm going to equals type. And then the value, I don't need to really worry about, but I'm going to pass it in anyway. We have value vars. And then we want to be able to see these two, and I think I already have them. I'm going to go and get them from here, which is small and large bags, and pass that in. Press Shift Tab, and now we have a type and variable for small bags. And I'm going to maybe look at 20 of these. And we can always, filter, but we see that small and large bags is now a variable. You can Shift and Tab, and you can see you can continually add, names of these columns. So you can pass in a list to give you the name. So that was our unpivot example. So next we want to be able to merge our data. And let's bring in a new column, and we know a new table, and we know how to bring a table in. So we're going to call this holiday table, and we're going to use the read CSV function again, and we're going to bring in that holiday table. And remember, you can press Shift Tab if you want to see some of the parameters or arguments. I'm going to go get the holiday table, go back in, drop that in. Remember, we want to change the direction of our slashes. Let's look at the head of our holiday table, and you can see now we have that. And let's make sure we're documenting our code. So merge data. So there's a couple ways to merge data. You can do a join or you do a merge. They both have the same effect. So let's do the same thing. So we don't need to look at the holiday table. So we want to take our table, and which is df, and then we want to use .merge. And what do we want to merge? You can see we want to merge a series or a data frame. So let's press Shift Tab Tab. How and on, similar to what we saw with our SQL. So if your table has different names for the columns that you are going to merge on, you may have to indicate those with right on or left on. But because our holiday table and our avocado table both have date, we can just pass in the table, which is holiday. And then we can say how. It's by default is inner, same as your SQL code. And we want to merge on, and then we equal, and we pass in the column name. Now, I'm going to run this so you see what that looks like, similar to what we did in SQL. And you can see we have our holiday here. So we want to make sure that this merge sticks. So I'm going to call this df, and if I save over it by using that equal sign, now that is permanently applied to the data frame within this coding environment. So now I have merged, and remember we can see how. So I merged with a inner join by default. And you can see we have 1,600 rows, but if we change how we brought that in, and I'm going to put left and run this, and then we check the data frame by just pressing df and running that. And if I go down, now you see we have 18,000, and we should have our nulls there. And you can see that is there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to cell, and then I'm just going to run all. And you can see we got rid of that X and Y. And the reason was because some of the previous code was there. So now we want to be able to use a case or change this information from holiday and put our normal information there. So let's change because we want to ultimately find out what's the cost from our normal day and other days. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another cell, and I'm going to use our where. So I'm going to isolate our column, which is the holiday here, and holiday. So where holiday, so you can see we have NaN, and we can do this in a couple different ways. So because we have a null here, we can say, okay, well, let's fill all of these nulls on holiday with a condition. So we can say dot fill NA, and then what do we want to fill it with? We want to fill it with the word normal. And let me just show you what that looks like. You can see that we have normal there. And if I resave that holiday over equals, that means it's going to be saved to our data frame. Now to the holiday table. So now we can check by using a group by. So we can say holiday, we want to group by holiday. And we want to group by function, not these brackets. So now we can group by holiday. And what do we want to see? We want to see the average price. And then we take average price and we take the mean. And then we run this, and now we can see the average price for a normal day and these holidays. Of course, we can sort this in the way we want. So now we can chain in another function called sort values. And we need to sort by average price. Oops. In this case, we don't need to pass in average price. We can just sort values. And you can see that's going in that direction. And then if we wanted to go in another direction, we put extending equals false. And now we can see that Labor Day is the highest.